Very good gamers, how are we? This is Games and Chill, and today we are in a new video in EMILIE's legendary build.
ごきげんよう、エミリエと申します。
Is it broken or not broken? Is it strong or not strong? Does it serve outside of burn or does it not serve? And above all, what burn equipment is there or does it exist? If we do not know practically any today, will it be for NATLAN? Well, today we're going to talk about weapons, construction, sets, constellation. But above all of a character who, like Xianyun, is not only strong, not only is the second best within the game, but within what I already thought and told you in the first impressions. I said textually. It's going to be a good support inside out of burn, but you don't have to count the year. You have to count only the energy that generates and the application of inside correctly on certain equipment. To start the strong build, I will tell you that I was surprised by the damage both inside and outside of the burn. Apart from that, there will be a video of EMILIE's top teams that we're still waiting for already. So leave a good like, a good utility among net, subscribe, leave a good comment for the algorithm. Okay. You know he's supporting us and he's helping the entire channel team a lot so that we can keep growing, and the channel keeps getting recommended, and that we continue to explode, and that soon we reach 200,000. Who knows if within anything 500,000. But well, we're about 140,000 subscribers, so exploit the like button and subscribe and go with the legendary build. From EMILIE. Alright, normals don't go up. Elementary build is their main source of damage. Has an initial hit that hits all enemies and applies them inside everyone, and then hits a single hit to a single enemy, and this is a necessary balance because if I applied hits in area to all enemies and burn, that you already know that when it is upon an enemy, enemies who are quite close will also receive that burn damage. Even if they are not affected by burn, would be the best support of the game if applied in area above Nahida, and this, it's not what they want. Now, it's got two scales of your elementary ability. The scaling, the first you see in the numbers. Here's the hit in area that applies inside to the second climb is the hits that you're doing inside to enemies, or, well, to a single enemy when you're playing without burn, and the second blow when the perfume goes pounding and upgrades. With an enemy that is with burn, as you see, it is 1 by 4. Are instead of a blow, 2 strokes, that also instead of climbing. By burn has good damage out of burn, more than I thought, and if it has very good damage, I was doing recurrent ticks. I've got it badly built. Now I'm talking about my construction of EMILIE, plus the last making ticks of 40-50 unburned casts. Making aggravations in teams because of Chlorind or Teams of Fate. You already see the core of playing since Chlorind Farina Nahida. Baiju is very common since when EMILIE instead of Nahida doing more damage than Nahida as sub DPS repeat and conditions doing more damage than Nahida as sub DPS, and I have Nahida C2. With which doing Nahida's calculus. C2, that I have to lower the defense of the enemies with which it receives more damage from the Nahida itself, versus EMILIE having in it account that they were Chero. Both EMILIE has managed to do more damage than Nahida outside the field without burn as support inside. Normal, remembering that it is limited to a single enemy when they are several enemies, as you lose, unlike Nahida, who, if pulses jump against all enemies. This is very important to explain that their elementary ability doesn't have much more. Has a passive that says that when the enemy is affected by burn, and so, I will summarize it because it is a lot of text, but it's that easy. Basically all this passive that you have around here is that when you hit enemies that are about to burn, the elemental is gaining as a kind of flowers below the elemental itself, and that makes it activate since the second effect. And the effect of this hit of the extra blow, that are the fragrances apart, you have to be attentive to the field, because they appear as a kind of Yuva when Wova disappears that leaves a Gindila to absorb in the field as it is equal, sometimes appears, this fragrance on the ground. And you have to pick it up. Many people ask you to pick up the fill if you have to pick it up because at 2 o'clock, fragrances collected is going to jump the tick that counts as elemental damage ability. And I'm going to tell it and explain it together. With the elemental jumps a hit that scales 600% of EMILIE's attack with when you go with Bennett, because this hit is Jesus Christ. And you can see 250, 350, 300,000 with the right equipment, and it is to have collected the fragrances, but apart this flower as it evolves. When you're hitting enemies affected by burn, simply the only concern is to go and pick up the fragrance. Or let's say the orb of the ground is a green orb now, the ulti. The good ulti, the elementary to finish, I forgot to comment, which is an Arcant cooldown, and I'm going to explain it. So Arcant cooldown is a cooldown that has much more use than dew. The very cooldown of the elemental that covers the uptime is to say that all the cooldown time and all the time being in field doing things will cover you, and apart. It is adaptive. That is to say that you can play in teams of 15 seconds of 18, and of 20 only explains the first impressions. This cooldown of elemental EMILIE reminds us very much of the cooldown of Albedo. That is also Arcant cooldown is a cooldown that almost no character other than Arcant has sincerely, and very few throughout the game, and it is a spectacular cooldown. The elemental has to normally place at the beginning of the rotation, then the ulti. Now you do have 2.8 seconds where you put a lot of hits. I think you put some in here. It actually says that when you're hitting against enemy, you hit a hit every 0.7. But if multiple enemies hit each enemy every 0.3, for 2.8 seconds you'll get 5 or 6 at most. Against many enemies you could get to put like 10, 12 hits, say. Like this, because every 0.3, 2.8 is almost 3 seconds, because you can put almost 9 hits against several enemies. Is strong, is very strong. Climbing is interesting, is very interesting with a team where I have not yet maxed out EMILIE, and I have it a little bad. I'm 60 years from now. I'm getting 70k a hit from the ulti, which I told you the first impressions before being able to test mine is very normal. Plus the ulti has no crown yet, that can reach more than 100 claw. I can make an ulti of $1 million nuke. Playing on a right team. This does burn, and with some extra bufo like Bennett because he's in a fit, and with Furina. Here, if you notice, I explain most of the ulti that always try to wait to throw it after Bennett's ulti someone. Gameplays you'll be watching because I've already been playing it when you're watching this build. I've already played it on stream a lot, and already played it on stream. The ulti whenever you try to throw it after Bennett's ulti so that it benefits from Bennett's ulti, of course. And the other talent of Ascension is more damage when you're hitting enemies affected by burn is another talent of Ascension. Linked to elemental that says the damage that infects EMILIE against enemies affected by burn. Burned enemies increases 15% every 1000 damage points up to a maximum of 36% when you weather EMILIE's attack for this talent in 2400 attack with a 2400. You have the maximum bufo, but the reality is that with Bennett you will reach more than 4000 in the field. Now this first talent that I've linked it before is basically that, as I explained to you, when you collect fragrances you can get to make this hit twice. You're going to make a hit inside in the area of the 600% EMILIE attack, i.e. blows of 250,000, almost 300,000 with a construction. Right apart from the 100,000 hits you make with this, apart from recurring 30-40k hits with this, is an amazing sub DPS. And I'm telling you, I'm talking about references to my building that's really bad, and I'd be missing a lot of critical damage because my items are pretty bad. Bad with the burn said the talents, as you see, are easy, and has an additional talent as Kokomi has the talent of how here, when on the battlefield, some perfume lumidulce created by EMILIE is the elemental, the ulti any. I'll show you in some of the gameplays in the subsequent team video. I played a Arlecchino burn team that is incredibly powerful, and I didn't lose my life because this makes you avoid going down your life so you can play and stuff like that. Very powerful. This is the kit, and it is very strong, is very good sub DPS, especially in burn, but it does a function being very good. Sub DPS inside out of burn. Now the constellations are not so important. In fact, we can start with the end, because in the end there's a lot of text here, but literally the chicks turns it into carry. Basically you've inverted normal attacks and loaded from inside, and want to play carry is no better than J-Zap, is no better than Narin, or it will be better than Kin. As carry Chero, so good chicks turns into carry, like many cone, increases the damage of fragrance collection and of the puree of the elemental and the ulti of all the blows you make as a stroke of elementary habila and talent. Passive, that is the blow this to 600% attack, i.e. increases your damage 20%, your overall damage to all your damage 20% is. Interesting as cone well. and then says this last salad is to turn the talent blah blah when a close character. The team causes a burn reaction against an enemy or inflige inside, i.e. if your carry is Kinish or a Tignari burns. That we have tried it to a burnt enemy creates an additional fragrance. This fragrance is to collect it before when collecting. The fragrance you release the hit this before, and with the cone maybe you can throw 3 hits of these instead of 2 per rotation, is it? More damage to make an extra hit of these that can put 250,000 3 times instead of 2 is more damage as a cone that gives you. Much more damage as if there was that is interesting. The recommend is a good support is not an Archon as such you can. To play 0 has a brutal damage who wants much more damage, and my friend can get it out, but it is not so indispensable. Like Novilet's cone or Yelen's cone or Furina's cone, and C2 is not so indispensable, is more damage the C2 when hitting. Enemy with anything basically puts you here a lot of text, but it's anything in general to reduce resistance to. The enemy's 30% resistance within, let's remember that the burn teams are based on that the enemy is affected by burning, and burning ticks are considered pyro damage, so wearing a green shade Kazuha makes you also doing more damage. Is that low resistance within EMILIE is not important, for burn damage is important. For the own hits inside EMILIE, that as you see if there are many hits and against the burn are double hits, remember by last the calculation of this constellation that I always said in many videos, that is if you have already lowered the resistance of an enemy. That is to say that you carry for example a set of memories of the forest that lowers resistance inside, because this will act from of having lowered 100% the resistances of enemies, and for example, it is 20 and you have lowered the 35 of the set. 20 that had plus another 15, what you lower additional below 0 resistances is going to be calculated as damage inflicted equivalent. Half of the resistances that you go down easy, that if the enemy has 0 resistances, this constellation gives you 15 damage. Inflicted if the enemy has 30 resistances, this constellation will give you 30 damage inflicted on many EMILIE teams. You don't go double inside, and you don't have another inside that carries the set of memories of the forest with which it's powerful, because in most cases it can amount to an extra 30% of the damage inflicted with EMILIE herself, thus making and you can put 3 instead of 2, and this is 30% usually additional damage inflicted because you don't have a source of lower resistances. Because EMILIE with burn equipment and the C2 is only activated with burn. As it puts here, you will always carry the burn set. You will not carry memories of the forest. Now we enter now. The C3 is the elemental plus 3, which is its main source of damage, and the C4. The duration of the ulti increases by 2 seconds, i.e. 5 seconds of ulti, with the C4 before in many betas was 5 seconds. Baza C, the ulti and the interval by which each enemy can be chosen as a target of the drops of these hitsu. I told you each against an enemy is every 0.7, but against several enemies is every 0.3 per enemy, as all hits are every 0.3, even if it's an enemy and it's 5 seconds of ulti with which you're going to put an enemy like 16-17 hits of the ulti that. You can get 100k stable to Chero or more than 100k with Cone, or C2 is after a lot of C4 without the 5 stars useful. A powerful C4 is a very strong C4, would recommend it, not because Tuchero does everything you have to do, and this is already ballooning. The C5 is the last 3, and the cheeks that I explained to you before. You imbued yourself from inside as if it were a car, and they put you a lot text, but let's imbue yourself 12 seconds inside to be a car, and point artifacts. This is very easy. Seen a lot of doubts with people, and in the end there's not a lot of doubts because it's very easy. Everything has to go when you see a team burn. That is going to be most teams and are their preferred teams because they are the strongest. You will go to the set of burns, the set that is in the same domain as the set of Alekino and Chlorine, the unfinished dream set that has a name I think we'll never remember, and everyone will call it a burn set, is their best set, gives you a joke. Don't go burn teams, go with memories of the forest to lower resistance inside and earn 15% of year in this way. Easy spoiler is good in teams out of ripe if it is strong, does not improve Nahida in certain circumstances, approaches now and overcomes it in damage to unitary and regenerates much more energy. And if it results because Nahida has problems against websites that EMILIE can play unitary, and there are also unitary websites that some abyss has been given, but it is not normal to be realistic. 100% Nahida enhancement improves 100% improvement. But then out of that, the damage is superior application against an enemy is superior, but against several is inferior. Even though no one has the problem of the webs, the energy is there because Injiva generates very well, but he also generates very well, and the theme when enemies disappear, and there are several rounds of enemies that benefits EMILIE and only applies against the enemy with which in general is better Nahida. But if no one won, you want to free her for another team, or you want the second best inside the game. Today is EMILIE the second best inside. That is 13.5 seconds, that is very little, and only has cost of 50 is an ulti, with a very low cost. Then the clock always. It's going to be attack EMILIE, doesn't seek mastery for burn EMILIE, doesn't have very big synergies, you don't have synergies in fact. With mastery, the mastery that is calculated to apply the burn damage does not usually count on EMILIE because EMILIE puts many hits with which usually reapply the one that will tell EMILIE's mastery. And if it does give the situation that a team counts it, EMILIE's mastery won't reach 500 or 400 mastery, so it's worth it to have mastery with EMILIE the Watch always. It's going to be an attack because it doesn't require much recharging nor requires mastery. Always attack inside has spectacular damage, like sub DPS and helmet or critical probability or critical damage. Sure you need because it scales with critical damage. If critical damage, which in some case you need probability helmet if you wear it with a critical damage weapon like Joma, or as a weapon of critical damage and then subdue them, critical proportion recharge up to 130, but if you carry your weapon. That's the raid charge of EMILIE 25 with his 30-35 weapon without his weapon, and from 130-35 of recharge ratio. Criticism at the level of calculations. I always tell you sometimes how far a character can go on a realistic level as reality. Is that EMILIE only looking for that minimal recharge and proportion can spare with good items to cape rate proportion and 70-240 me? I don't have good items, I still can't get to that critical ratio, depending also on the weapons, but you can. And without those proportions that I still don't have, you can reach the numbers that I told you of 100k per hit of the ulti of the Nuke S, with a 200 and peak of continuous blows of 20-30,000 and doing other gravity in team without burn making half hit C. But also continuous blows of 20,000 is a salve the scaling and damage sub DPS of EMILIE after the items that already. If you still have enough left over there, you would have to look for attack percent, but first proportion weapons, well, let's submerge. Because there's always a new character coming out, it's not a question of making people dizzy and explaining an infinite pool of 1,000 combinations. I also understand the point of view of you players who will say, good Phil, but I have this, and this is what? Better than I have because I only have this. Let's simplify. His best weapon of the whole game is his weapon. I think you all knew, has the possibility of playing Favonius to be drummer even more than the one already, because it will come very well, and in fact, $30 of Favonius recharges all the recharge you need with which if you go Favonius, you just have to look for proportion. Criticism in the substat and attack percent, but lending the critical proportion. But if already the entire team has recharge because plays a burn team with Fiorina that can vaporize on the burn, and some crackling team with Fiorina that could work perfectly for example, and your Frin carries Favonius, so you don't need Favoris in EMILIE is one more option, as if you have no choice or have no primalty or have no other weapon because it is very new. But from there, EMILIE needs weapons of harm, that is weapons level. I'm going to explain it much better weapons of critical damage and probability. I've seen how it always happens, and it's not that it's the worst thing in the world, but it's pretty bad at recommendations. And guides where EMILIE recommends attacks such as washing the wind of gun for the attack that gives you or weapons that in general don't give you bad proportion, only want weapons of critical proportion and you don't want master's weapons with which starting. For the battle pass that has a battle pass to the dual launch is very good, even if you have less attack but the same, you make up for it with Bennett. Passive attacks in your battle pass spear. You don't want it, because you don't want the subset. Mastery the Dark Rock as a weapon free to play, quite free to play below the pass of battle that does not have pass. Battle basically the Dark Rock. If not, this is the situation in which the fabulous rule recharges and you are not so new. And you just want me to do more damage because you already have Permagulti on the team. The Crag is the best free to play in dot. You don't have to go do weird stuff. You don't have to do rare weapons, you don't have to do event weapons, you don't need attack weapons, you don't just want critical ratio. Dark Rock, if you don't have the dual spear and then going to the 5-star guns, we need simple stats. Base attack probability or damage, with which all 5-star game spears give you critical proportion or something like that you don't want to catch because you're overloaded and your damage doesn't go with the ulti. Help us to say anyone. A Jade Hawk is one of the best weapons for Emilie, who in fact the Jade Hawk would use. Much better, for example, than Arlecchino's weapon, because Emilie would not activate the passive Arlecchino's weapon, but if it activates all, the passive to the Jade Falcon, because you enter quite a few hits, you put a basic, 2 active, the damage inflicted, additional, and ready. And then whoever has Joma, that gives you 66 of critical year with more attack in the passive in proportion to your life. The Joma is very good. For Emilie too, but for example, I don't know why I've seen the spear out there, but you don't go with mastery, and it's true that you gives good attack in proportion to the mastery in case of some team that gives you more mastery consonants within, but the reality is that the teams that try most is much better to play it without even consonants inside is unique within the team. Then the Shovel of Ifs is not bad because it gives you probability, but far above the shovel that you can play it to your own. But to a Xiangling in certain circumstances in Xiangling's build, I speak of the shovel to a Hu Tao in certain circumstances. It's not his best weapon, but it's still very good depending on the circumstances in Hu Tao, because you don't put a shovel on Emilie because there are characters who will make it much more profitable, and really, if you are undecided, we sum up Favonius if it has no energy. All of the team and you are very new, and just want everyone to throw away the ulti to learn from the game. Launch the duel if you have a Dark Rock Battle Pass if you are free to play, and you have no Battle Pass and even the Rock. In some case it can help more than the dual spear and 5 stars. His weapon is, of course, the home comes very well. The Jade Falcon of Permanent would say that is what I will recommend in general because many have Jade Falcon and from. Hence, weapons of critical probability, critical damage as can be the staff, but below the Jade and some other weapon that Willow. I'm forgetting that maybe it's a spear that gives us critical probability, high critical damage, but in general the weapons is. That's very simple. You're just looking for attack and critical ratio. You don't want any more. And the stats 25 with their 30-35 gun without their 70 gun. Of probability, as always, the damage as I say in your stat can become 240 to max out the ratio, and from there. Attack everything you can know elementary mastery, because you're not going to take advantage of it. Is the damage as I say in your stat can become 240 to max out the ratio, and from there. Attack everything you can know elementary mastery, because you're not going to take advantage of it. This is Emilie, and she's an amazing character. To this day, that has exceeded my expectations, does more damage the one that I thought is very good DPS. And above all the point I leave you, that this isn't like kooky or stop good or wrong, but maybe then they get better and then they get better is true Emilie a day. Of today is strong, and in fact it is noticed that NATLAN, the evolution of the goal, will be to Kinish with Crackling and Burn, surely. Kinish EMILIE is a very good combination Mualani, a vaporized on Burn, possibly Mualani Emilie be not, because Mualani goes with attack, but a combination that of Mualani Emilie and some Pyro for Burn has been best in slot the most. Likely, Mualani and Mavuika will notice that they will have synergies with the reverse melts of applying a Burn and making a melt. About burning things like that, with which Emilie is not only strong, but it seems that NATLAN's goal and evolution. Leonat Hoyovasers wants to wear with teams that were never played, and that has to do with Pyro. That is the nation of NATLAN. I would say that only if you want to adapt to NATLAN's goal will I continue to combine it with Kinish and Mualani, but also if you feel that you need inside, if you feel that you have 80,000 inside, if you don't want more inside because it's comfortable with the inside of your team. So it's true that all the characters are equipped talk like you pull for what you like, and the long etc. of disclaimers, but in the end I say here to you a more solid opinion with objectivity for you to take a good decision then, since I throw for what you like and yes or no that equips or does not equip or that I do not have Protomus that. It's up to everyone. Emilie is a bad beast, and if today she would come closer to being within the octopus little more let. A good ultimate sign up, leave a good comment for you to enjoy and watch the video on the channel. Thank you for supporting so much, thanks for all the interaction and everything. Goodbye.